Hi everybody, just welcoming those who have joined the call. We're just going to give it one more minute to allow for some additional attendees to join, and then we'll get started. Okay. Hello and welcome to everyone today. This is the information session for the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund, round 2. To begin, I would like to acknowledge and honour the traditional custodians on the land meeting across Australia today. I was born and raised on the Kamilaroi country, and I'm speaking to you today from the Turrbal and Yagara lands. I pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present today. Given Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were Australia's first manufacturers, it's an important acknowledgement. My name is Tracy Constable, and I'm a Business Development Manager for Oz Industry. The Oz Industry National Outreach Network of regional managers and business development managers extends across Australia. We support businesses with advice, connections, development opportunities and funding to help you grow, diversify and strengthen. Some housekeeping today is we've placed everybody on mute and your videos are turned off. We won't have an opportunity to address the Q&A function today. And any questions you have about the content being presented, can you please direct all your questions to mmf@industry.gov.au. We'll provide that email address through the presentation and at the end as well. The MMF team, our Manufacturing Modernisation Fund team, are closely monitoring this mailbox and will respond as quickly as possible to you. This session will go for 1 hour and a recording will be uploaded onto the Manufacturing Modernisation webpage, which can be found at business.gov.au/MMF. I'd like to introduce Daniel Ioannidis, who is the Manager of the Manufacturing and Advanced Technology Programs for Oz Industry. Daniel will provide an overview of the round 2 guidelines of the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund, including the eligibility requirements and key points for the assessment criteria. He will also provide some general tips for presenting a really strong application into the program. And as I said, if you have any questions as we go along today, please note them down. And if you can submit them all to the email address, which is mmf@industry.gov.au. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Tracy, and look, welcome to everyone around Australia today who are joining us live for the webinar, and an acknowledgement to those who may be watching this session at a later point, and welcome to you for when that occurs. In terms of today's session, we've had incredible interest in attending, to the point where it was a fully subscribed session, and that was part of the reason for looking to provide a recording for a later point, which is great from our perspective. It shows there is real interest in the program and in the broader strategy, which I'll talk about as we go through the presentation. It also, to me, emphasises the importance of making sure you're arming yourself with all the information that you have available to you and utilising that information. So the webinar is just one avenue, and we'll talk about some other avenues to do that as we go through. Because this is a competitive grant process, and the fact that we are seeing such early interest in the program means it will translate to a competitive process, and indeed that's certainly what we we saw under the round one of the program. So thank you for those that are attending, and depending on at what point you are able to join through the information shared through this session. Just to recap Tracy's comments in terms of my role and the delivery of this particular program. I also work for Oz Industry, as she mentioned. I have responsibility for all the delivery and administration of a number of manufacturing support programs. So Manufacturing Modernisation Fund Round 1 is one of those, but there are several others that we are currently managing at the moment. And I'll also talk about the involvement that we have across some of the other strategy and key initiatives coming through the broader modern manufacturing strategy. So in terms of today's agenda, there's a few things I'd like to cover off. One is just a bit of an introduction to the strategy. I think there will be varying degrees or awareness of what the strategy is and what it's involving, and also the sort of what the timings and where that's tracking to. So I'll start with a bit of an overview of that over the first few slides. And then the bulk of the presentation will be looking at round 2 of the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund. And with that, there's a few sort of key areas, and Tracy did touch upon those that I want to cover off. One is just an overview of the program and the program information. Another is key dates and timing considerations, which can become quite important, particularly at the time we're actually opening for applications and closing for applications. And I'll make some comments on that for awareness as we go through. As Tracy also mentioned, the eligibility requirements, they're really key to understanding, I guess, where your business or potential project fits within what the intent of the program is. And there are some differences from round 1 to round 2, and I'll comment on those as we go through the presentation, particularly the most sort of pertinent or relevant parts to those differences. Have a bit of a discussion and share a few slides in relation to what we see as supported activities under the program, because sometimes that can be a source of, I guess, questions that we do see coming through in relation to the guidelines and what that means for particular applications or projects. And we'll have a look at the assessment criteria as part of that overview and give some tips and tricks about how to approach that and what you need to consider when you're looking at responding to assessment criteria. There'll be another sort of set of slides a little bit later on, which will talk in more broad terms about how to approach the application process, which goes beyond just responding to the merit criteria, which I think many people will find useful and helpful, not just for applying for this particular program, for our other programs more broadly. We'll also have a look at the actual application process. What are the next steps once you've gone through some of those stages that I'm going to talk about in terms of preparing and submitting an application? How do you actually do it in practice? And if you've got further questions, or if you'd like to find further information beyond the webinar, where you can go to find that kind of information. So hopefully it's a fairly comprehensive hour, and as Tracy's mentioned, if at the end of that process you would like to answer some further questions, or if you've got any other specific things that you'd like covered off, then we'll provide some details for you to be able to do that. So just getting into some of those, I guess, earlier broader comments around the strategy, the modern manufacturing strategy, which does have a fairly, how can I say, important influence over the way in which round 2 of the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund has been designed and shaped. The strategy itself was released and announced in October of this year. It was part of the budget announcement and certainly formed a central plank to that budget announcement. The strategy's vision is for Australia to be recognised as a high quality and sustainable manufacturing nation that helps to deliver a strong, modern and resilient economy for all Australians. So with that, what the strategy is trying to achieve is a manufacturing sector that can increase its competitiveness, build scale and enhance future resilience. And some of the initiatives which stem from that will become clearer as we go through those, but also around that creating that or achieving that vision. In terms of the funding attached to that announcement, it's a $1.5 billion investment over the strategy. And as I mentioned, it was a central part of the budget and also a central part of the government's job making plan. Now, as part of the strategy, there were 6 national manufacturing priorities that were announced by by the Prime Minister and also Karen Andrews MP as part of their strategy announcements. And I'll give some details in a minute about where you can find those relevant links and copies of those announcements to review and go through post this webinar. But the 6 strategies that were manufacturing priorities that were announced as part of the strategy were resources, technology and critical minerals processing, food and beverage, medical products, recycling and clean energy, defence and space. Now these particular national manufacturing priorities were announced because they were seen as, and they are seen as, areas of comparative advantage and strategic opportunities moving forward for Australia. The priorities represent sectors where we've got the potential to deliver long-term transformational outcomes for the Australian economy and the Australian manufacturing sector. And that is kind of the linkage that I talked about before that you'll see coming through in terms of some of the program design changes for round 2 of the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund compared to round 1, because it is certainly in alignment with that broader strategy and what it's trying to achieve. So just to cover off some of the key initiatives that sit under the strategy, the largest component in terms of funding of that $1.5 billion is the Modern Manufacturing Initiative. It has 3 program streams or elements that sit within it underneath that particular initiative. The guidelines for those particular streams will start to be released from early next year. They are going to be informed and are being informed through an industry-led consultation process and also will be dependent on the release of individual roadmaps that are being developed as we speak to inform some of those guidelines development and the program design for those 3 initiatives. So if you are interested beyond the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund and looking at some of the other elements or key initiatives within the strategy, I strongly suggest you look at the link and the tip that I've got on this particular slide, which will enable you to review what is currently publicly available ahead of those roadmaps being developed and guidelines being published, but also give you a chance to follow the links and register for updates so they become available to you as soon as they're actually published. So I strongly encourage everyone who's part of the webinar today and also moving forward watching at a later date to take that opportunity to subscribe if you haven't done so already. So just to touch upon the Modern Manufacturing Initiative in terms of what it's trying to achieve, again, there'll be more information and detail released on that as we go forward, but at a high level, it's seeking to achieve an Australian manufacturing sector that is working to scale, that is working to innovate, that is working to collaborate, and looking to integrate into local and global supply chains. And so the design of each of those individual streams will be slightly shaped depending on the intent of what it's trying to achieve. But again, keep in contact through the subscriptions and more information will be released as we get into next year. The other key initiative that sits within those elements is the Supply Chain Resilience Initiative. So the Supply Chain Resilience Initiative is aimed to support and better understand supply chain vulnerabilities. That was certainly something that was evident through the COVID or the height of the COVID pandemic, that supply chains needed to be better understood and we needed to address opportunities to improve that vulnerability. So as those program guidelines are developed, more information will be shared moving forward. It's anticipated that applications and projects that may seek to, or businesses that may seek to submit projects under that particular stream will do so from 1 July of next year. I talked about the announcements that were made in October in terms of the strategy. If you'd like to find some information, and this is probably more a slide that's relevant to those who are looking at the webinar at a later date, but you'll be able to follow those particular links. One is to Karen Andrews MP and also Prime Minister Scott Morrison's release of or speech to the National Press Club announcing the Modern Manufacturing Strategy as part of the budget. So I'd strongly encourage you to have a look at those links post this session and find out as much as you can about what was said. So the third key initiative, and which is the main part of what we're looking at today in terms of this webinar, is looking at the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund. I mentioned there was a round one of the program that was not delivered or part of the modern manufacturing strategy. So round two in particular is, and as I said, has been shaped in design, influenced in design due to that particular fact. Round one was extremely popular and highly successful program. So it was heavily subscribed in terms of the number of applications that were received, and as I said, we've got real strong interest in round two of the program. So clearly, it's targeting businesses and SMEs that are looking for that particular help to achieve what the strategy is looking to do. Under round one, just to give a bit of context, we supported, or the government supported, around 200 projects, or committed to around 200 projects that in value in terms of investment reflected $215 million. And those projects were expected to create up to 2,600 new jobs. And some of those core things around jobs and investment are also, again, reflected through the design of round two. So under round two, the government's offering another $50 million, which in grant funding, which is similar to what it was under round one, to help modernise our manufacturing sector. Round two will look at helping SMEs again as the same target as round one. It will support projects that align with one or more of the national manufacturing priorities. I'll just sort of pause and highlight why, or demonstrate why I've highlighted the projects that align on this particular slide. So what we're really focusing on, particularly for this part or this key initiative, the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund, is looking at projects that align. So we aren't necessarily saying that to be eligible, a business must be operating in one of those 6 priority areas identified in some of the earlier slides. What is being said is that we're looking at the project and how that particular project will support manufacturing in one of those national manufacturing areas. Now, I'll touch upon that a little bit more as we go through the slides, but I just wanted to make that important distinction based on some earlier inquiries we've had in relation to the program, that it isn't about ruling out those that are currently not operating in a national manufacturing priority area or sector. It is about assessing the projects that will contribute to one of those 6 priority sectors. So the fund is looking to stimulate investment in transformative manufacturing technologies and also processes to allow businesses to produce new products or diversify to new markets. So in a nutshell, this program is about investment, capital investment, looking at technology that's advanced, looking at how that will change your business's processes, and also allow you to ultimately produce new products or get into new markets. That's a really simplified way of explaining or summarising what this particular fund is targeting. It is, as I mentioned, the first of the key initiatives to be to open for applications since the strategy announcement was made, and it's really looking to fast track some of that investment with those overarching aims of creating new jobs. The next line is a little bit of a distinction from round two, where we're also looking to capture and make sure we recognise that these projects will also allow businesses to retain existing Australian jobs. So there's a bit of a dual consideration there and benefit for Australia when it comes to these particular projects and what the fund is looking to achieve. Consistent with round one, we're still looking at supporting those projects that can demonstrate how they're going to upskill their workforce and broaden the knowledge and skills of the Australian manufacturing workforce more broadly. And just in terms of that COVID kind of post-COVID transition, making sure that the investment we're working to implement is helping to support that post-COVID recovery. So looking at the objectives or what the fund is actually going to provide potential applicants and businesses. It is as it was in round one, a national-based program, so open to all. It's going to be a merit-based program, and I've talked about the fact that we've got that early interest in it. So there will be a need to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward in terms of your application, because it will be a competitive process like it was in round one. It offers targeted support for eligible SMEs, and for the purpose of this particular initiative under the strategy, that is talking about businesses with a head count, so not an FTE count, but a head count of up to 199 employees. And we seem to have a number of questions in relation to this since we've released the guidelines and application process. And down the bottom, I've put some tips in there to refer to and just understand in terms of what that means when you're getting to the point of submitting an application. So determining your headcount, we're looking at full-time and part-time employees as well as casuals who are employed. They must form part of your headcount. Contractors are not forming part of your headcount for the purposes of this particular program. And eligibility to apply is based on the applicant company. That's been another question that we have seen a few times come through in the last week or so. So we're narrowing or defining this as the applicant company. We're not considering related or parent company total numbers in terms of making that assessment. It's about the applicant company. The other point I'll make is that when you're determining that count, we are looking at the count as of the time that you're looking to apply. So as we get through the presentation, it'll be clear that you're part of the merit response and also responding to the application form. You're going to have to identify your level of job creation. You will not rule yourself out if you're sort of at the higher end of that 199 range and are going to forecast a number of jobs that will take you over that. We're assessing that count on the basis of when you seek to apply for the fund. So some key things there that hopefully will help in terms of your process, because we have seen that question come up a number of times. And I'll make some reference to some of our key documents later on, but the FAQs which are available on our MMF2 landing page through business.gov.au does provide some information that will help guide you through some of these questions in relation to determining headcount. Some other aspects to consider in terms of what the second round of the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund will provide. Grants are going to be offered from $100,000 to $1 million, and that's based on a 25% eligible project expenditure commitment. So, in other words, if you're looking to apply for a grant of $100,000, which will be at the minimum end, you would need to come up as a business or as an applicant for $400,000 as the minimum amount to contribute to that project. So on that particular example, an applicant is providing 3/4 of the funding, the government will provide one quarter of the funding, a 3-to-1 ratio. In terms of the project profile, so the program profile, we're looking for maximum of 2-year projects under the fund. But the profiling itself will run over 3 years, from the current financial year through to 2022-23. And if you've had a close look at the guidelines to date already, or if you haven't, I strongly suggest you do. It talks about timing of when we expect some of that to start to flow in terms of outcomes and whatnot. So, and I'll touch upon the timing aspect as we go through the slides. Okay, key dates. So I mentioned I'd talk about key dates. We soft launched for this particular program on the 20th of November. So in effect, what that means is guidelines were made available and published on business.gov.au on the MMF landing page. With the guidelines, and this is a distinction from round one, what we did offer too is also a copy of the sample application form. That the feedback that we've had to date is that that's been really valuable in terms of allowing potential applicants to review the guidelines, but also turn their mind to the types of questions that are going to have to be responded to as part of the application process. And there's lots of help text and hint text in that sample application form. So I'll touch upon it a bit later, but strongly suggest that if you are looking to apply, and if you haven't done so yet, ensure that not only the guidelines are looked at, but also take advantage of the fact that that sample application form is in there. We then officially opened for applications on the 4th of December, and we'll close for applications in the new year on the 21st of January. And I'll just sort of take note of the fact that we've highlighted 5 p.m AED time. Historically, with a number of programs of sort of a larger volume, which is likely to be the case for this particular round of the fund, there is a tendency to have applications coming in right on that closing date. It's really important to understand that late applications can't be accepted. So just to the best extent that you can, noting that there is a Christmas period in between and the summer shutdown period in between, try to manage that so that you're not submitting your application at a very last stage, because we won't be able to accept late applications in terms of equity and fairness for all people who are looking to apply or businesses looking to apply. If you are seeking to apply, the sample application form is a good starting point in terms of figuring out what it is you need to consider in terms of your responses, but it can't be relied upon in terms of submitting an application. Formal applications have to be submitted through the portal that is available through business.gov.au, and the slides that are provided later in the presentation will sort of step you through where you need to go through and what the process is at a very high level. But that's the only way it can be submitted. It has to be submitted through the online portal, not through a sample application form or a Word document sent through via email. So just in terms of timing, just to recap before I get to that last point, soft launching on the 20th of November and a closing date of 21 January does sort of recognise that there is going to be for some a short period or shutdown in between, but overall that gives around about a 9-week period of applications for consideration and then submission. And that is probably more than what we would provide for standard programs or programs of this nature. So we've tried to take into account the, I guess, the timing perspective, and also that's a reflection of I guess, of COVID, the impact of COVID, and a later budget cycle. So, yes, just the hint would be just to make sure that you're paying attention to that timeline and the closing date, and making sure that you're preparing for that and preparing your application ahead of that, and having it front of mind. The only other point I'll make just there from the slide is that applicants can only submit one application for assessment. So there might be circumstances where an applicant submits an application and has got an entity structure wrong, or there's been an issue with what they've submitted. If you are in that circumstance or situation, feel free to contact us before the closing date. That there is an ability to withdraw or to not proceed with that application and submit a new application for consideration, but when we say one application only, that's one application that's going to be considered by the committee. In terms of timing, there's some additional information provided in the guidelines, and that's the next tip that I've put down the bottom of this particular slide, which talks about some of the key dates and expected timing for the assessment process and outcome process, and I did mention that a little bit earlier on. If you're keen to understand what it means post 21 January and the likely timings on that, I'd suggest you to have a look at that particular part in the table that sits towards the bottom of section 7 to get a sense of that likely timing. Okay, looking at the eligibility criteria. There's some core eligibility criteria, which are fairly commonplace across most programs. Then for this particular program, there's some additional eligibility criteria, which I'll cover off in the next slide. And then I'll also touch upon some of the criteria that demonstrates who can't apply. So under this particular part of the guidelines and the eligibility requirements, to get into the program, you need to have a registered ABN, you need to be non-tax exempt, and be registered for GST. The other aspect in terms of core eligibility requirements in terms of entity structure is that you need to be incorporated in Australia and you need to be a trading corporation. So there's some sort of specific words there, and that's taken straight from the guidelines, which won't necessarily relate direct, but effectively you need to be a trading organisation. We've also made it quite clear, and this was something that came through round 1, there was an ambiguity around this for some customers about whether or not as a startup they were able to apply. We haven't excluded startups under round 2 as we did in round 1. It does bring some other challenges for startups who are looking to apply in terms of how they respond to the merit criteria, but provided they can demonstrate a case that they are going to be trading and they've got an opportunity that presents and they can actually show that through their application, then startups are eligible to apply, but they'll just have to address that through the way they respond to other parts of their application. So looking at some of those other eligibility requirements specific to this particular program. So the first one is the SME count and head count, and we have talked about that already, so I won't necessarily cover that off. I did briefly touch upon an example of a business applying for a minimum grant amount and having to have at least $400,000 worth of eligible project expenditure. That's relevant, particularly for those who are looking to apply on that exact example, so at the lower end of the grant range. As an eligibility requirement, it's really important that if you are at that lower level in terms of the grant ask, that you're really clear about the type and eligibility expenditure that you're including in your projects. If there is a significant amount of ineligible expenditure included within that 400,000, that is going to cause some issues in terms of your eligibility under this scheme, and that is something that is a little bit distinct from round one. So for those who are looking to apply at sort of that level, just make sure that you've got that really clear in your minds, that you've understood the guidelines, understood the eligibility requirements in terms of eligible expenditure, and put your best foot forward in terms of that when applying. One of the things that's consistent from round one to round two, and I've spoken about already, and it's really clear that it lines up to the strategy more broadly, the broad modern manufacturing strategy, is you need to identify the job creation level that you're going to bring as a result of your project or directly from your project. In the application form for round two, what has been introduced, which wasn't there in round one, is some field numerical boxes which must be entered into to submit your application, and that will ask you to include what the level of job creation you expect to be coming directly from your project. It will also ask you to identify the level of job retention that you expect to be generated or achieved as a direct result of your project. And as I said, you'll be asked to fill those in, and you won't be able to submit unless you've actually responded to it. But that isn't the first and only part of the job creation assessment or reflection process through the application. And I'll talk about what the impact is and how that extends to the merit or assessment response a little bit later on. Talked a little bit earlier about under the next point, talks about where your project aligns to one or more of the 6 manufacturing priorities. Talked a little bit earlier about what they are and the 6 that have been announced as part of the strategy. Again, I'll just re-emphasise at this point, this is about the project for this particular program. It's not about the business and where it currently operates. And we'll also provide some examples in the coming slides around how that might actually work in practice for those particular projects where a business is perhaps not currently operating in one of those particular priority areas, or has a particular project which is supporting another business that is operating in one of those areas, and work through some of these examples and some things to think about in relation to that. Some of the key documents you'll need to provide as part of your eligibility process include evidence of support from your board or from your CEO in the absence of a board, as well as an accountant declaration that confirms you can fund that 75% minimum contribution that we talked about earlier. So in the prior program, in the prior round, we did have an ability for businesses to submit that on in a format that they felt best reflected those particular claims. Under round two, we've standardised that process in terms of a template, and so you must submit your declarations in relation to those 2 particular key pieces of information or attachments in the provided template, which is available through the application form and on business.gov.au. Just circling back to the tips that are provided to the right on this particular slide, that bottom tip is just referencing what I just mentioned there about where to find those standard or templated documents for the board support letter and the accountant declaration. But just above it is just a reflection also of the tip that presenting a case, or you're putting your best case forward as to why your project aligns to a national manufacturing priority area is an eligibility requirement, and that's why we're talking about it in this particular context. But equally, it's also a merit assessment consideration for the committee. So you will be asked to address that threshold or that particular aspect of the national manufacturing priority in your project, both as an eligibility requirement, but in your written response to the merit criteria. So I'll touch upon, I guess, the importance of that as we get to the assessment criteria slides, but just have that sort of clear in your minds at the moment. There is a dual sort of part of the application process, eligibility and also merit. So very briefly, this is a little bit more straightforward, perhaps other than the trust element of this slide, but who's not eligible to apply for the program? It's not targeted at individuals or partnerships who may be seeking to apply. If I skip to the fourth point, it also doesn't allow for applications from a Commonwealth, state, territory or local government body to apply, but where you may seek to apply in a trust structure, it will only be on the basis that a trust, incorporated trustee applying on behalf of a trust submits an application. So a trust itself, and in its own right, can't apply for this particular program. And it's a fairly standard approach across a lot of the granting programs that Australia delivers. But if you are an incorporated trustee applying on behalf of a trust, you may seek to apply. You are eligible under the program to apply. Now, the tip that we put to the right to that, because this is a source of confusion at times for when businesses do make that decision to submit an application, is make sure that you're clear around the trust structure that you're looking to submit your application under. And in the sample application form that we've got published under the key document section of the program on business.gov.au on the landing page, we've provided some really good, clear instructions on how to do that and the steps that you need to follow to make sure that you do submit under the right entity structure and then not cause any issues in terms of your application at a later point or when you go to submit. The other thing just to be aware of, it is a requirement that if you're applying under that kind of trustee structure, that you do provide us a copy of your trust deed to demonstrate that the structure you've applied under is legally able to do so. So if you are in that sort of situation where you think that's where you're looking to apply, you'll need to make sure that you do have access to a valid and current signed or executed copy of your trust deed to demonstrate that relationship. So looking at manufacturing and how we've defined manufacturing for the purposes of this particular program. And this won't necessarily be a straight line approach to the broader strategy, but for the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund, it does apply. So, manufacturing for the purposes of this program refers to the transformation of materials, substances or components into products. And so we've used that term products quite a bit throughout the presentation, and it's important to take note of that. It's about the manufacturing of products. The newly manufactured products can be sold to consumers or to other manufacturing businesses. And that particular sort of difference, that there are options there that's not just direct to consumers, is important also in the context of understanding how you can demonstrate your project aligning to a national manufacturing priority. And I'll come back to that in the example that I'm about to go through shortly. So what do we mean in terms of what is manufacturing under round 2 of this particular program? Well, we aren't talking about pre-manufacturing activities, so things like warehousing, delivery, R&D, aspects of R&D activity, and we're not talking about some of the post-manufacturing activities for this program. So things like packaging, storage, distribution. What we're looking at is the production, and focusing on is the production of manufactured goods and activities that directly relate to that production. And if you're looking for a clear definition that we've provided, if you go to the program guideline under that tip down the bottom and refer to section 14, the glossary does provide a bit of an extended definition and talks about, I guess, the limitations or the barriers that were set around the types of activities that you are able to claim as manufacturing under this particular program. One point I'll just make in terms of an additional tip that's not sort of captured in the slide is that whilst we've demonstrated, we've indicated that packaging as a post-manufacturing activity is not considered manufacturing for this particular program, there may be some instances where you're undertaking certain activities or intending to invest as part of your project, some investment in capital items that will help with packaging that directly relate to your particular product. So to give a really simplified example, if you're operating in or undertaking a project in the food and beverage national manufacturing priority area, and you're producing or processing potato chips, you can't necessarily sell the potato chip by itself. It needs to be contained in a packet. If you're incurring some expenditure to a particular project, that also incorporates some advancement or some technology that supports a newer or improved way of actually, for example, producing that packet, that is something that potentially could be in scope for the program. Where that ends is that if you're looking to incorporate a particular piece of equipment that will help you box those items once packaged, or if you're looking at shrink wrapping or anything that sort of post that key product aspect, is unlikely to be considered as manufacturing under the program. So if you have questions about specific to your particular project that you'd like to clarify that when we give you the details around whether ask further questions, feel free to do so. But just thought that would be an additional handy tip just to consider as part of understanding how manufacturing is defined under this particular program. So this particular slide again is probably more for the benefit of those who are looking at the webinar at a later date. I don't intend to go through some of those videos, examples and the links that are provided there, but those who are watching at a later date may well choose to do so, and I encourage you to do so. Really what this slide is supposed to do and help you with is just give a sense of the type of technology that we would expect to be seeing as part of the projects that would be submitted under round 2 of this program. So the ones we've got listed there as examples are technology that incorporates robotics or high-tech automation, artificial intelligence and machine learning, additive manufacturing and technologies associated with that, Industry 4.0 and digitalisation type technology. That's the kind of, I guess, sense or the type of technology that we're hoping to see come through from these projects. I've emphasised the word is transformative quite a lot through the presentation, and that type of technology is what we're going to expect to see will result in transformative changes to individual businesses, to the sector in which those businesses operate, and more broadly to the broader manufacturing sector. There, of course, would be others. So that list is not exhaustive. For example, biotechnologies, nanotechnologies. There'd be a range of other sort of advanced manufacturing technologies which may come into play for your particular project, but that's really just there to give you a sense of what type of technology might be in scope for this particular round of the program. So what the next few slides will attempt to do is cover off a few things and a few examples to put some of what I've said so far into context. The first one is, and these are sort of made up examples, they're not based on any particular companies or round 1 applicants or anything like that, but they're just to give a sense of, first of all, this one is around the technology and also, I guess, an example where we do see a project that is and a business that is in a national manufacturing priority area, and then I'll have a look at some of, I guess, some of those more, less certain or different types of examples when it comes to project alignment and the national manufacturing priority areas. So looking at this example of Snacks R Us Proprietary Limited, the context is it's an established snack food manufacturer with 110 employees as a headcount. Currently produce a range of biscuits with 2 of these lines already exported. There's growing demand for these biscuits, and they've evidenced this by comprehensive market research provided with the application. They've also provided expressions of interest from some of their key customers who are seeking to get significantly increased supply contracts moving forward. However, the company's done some review of their internal production analysis and looked at their current margins, and they said that is being prohibitive at the moment in terms of meeting that demand for scaling up or expansion, particularly by the use of its current equipment and access to current technology. Snacks R Us have identified that investment in new capital equipment using some of that advanced technology we just spoke about is required to do this. So what their project is proposing to do is a $4 million investment, including the acquisition of 3 state-of-the-art flavouring applicators, installation of robotics and automation equipment, and the use of human-machine interface incorporating AI learning and graphic controls to track production and analytics in real time. The project will enable the business to transform its manufacturing operations, deliver increased production run rates to meet that demand that they've spoken about, expansion into potential new product lines, reduce defect rates in production, as well as lower maintenance and downtime costs through the use of that technology and that investment. So this is again, whilst it's not a real example necessarily, it's a good way of sort of introducing a couple of key things that you need to think about in putting an application forward. Are they a manufacturer? Clearly they are, and sitting within food and beverage as a national manufacturing priority area. Are they looking to adopt the type of technology that is what this program is targeting in terms of being advanced technology, and have they demonstrated a case with evidence that technology will help them meet a need and an opportunity to do so? And I think quite clearly that they've been able to tick that through the points that are provided in this particular example. So if you're looking to apply to this particular program, think about the manufacturing question, think about the application of the project to alignment to a national manufacturing priority area, and then think about the type of technology and investment you're looking to do to undertake and what that means in terms of outcomes for your business. Moving to the next example, and this is more so about looking at project alignment. And this is not a real example. Auto Parts Proprietary Limited are an automotive component producer. They have an opportunity to diversify their product offering into both the defence and the mining sectors by leveraging off some of their existing IP for producing specialised springs and bearing components. So Auto Parts at the moment, from what they're currently producing and where they've been operating, don't, outside of this project, necessarily demonstrate an alignment to one of the national manufacturing priority areas, but they do have an opportunity and a potential project that might get them there. So the project they're looking to do is to build, to look to supply components for use in the manufacture of defence and mining equipment. Again, to the one I just made, whilst not operating in a priority sector, they can demonstrate a strong business case. They can demonstrate there's a market opportunity to underpin the project, and they've evidenced that strategic opportunity with the information they've provided through their application to demonstrate that there's an opportunity there to win new contracts, but also to displace important parts that are currently coming in from overseas suppliers. As part of their project, they're modelling that 12 new production positions would be created over the life of the project, and 2 new design jobs are expected to also come as a result of the project. So you can see the flow there, that whilst, on face value, an auto component producer isn't necessarily operating in a national manufacturing priority area, what this does demonstrate is that there may be opportunities for those particular businesses to put forward a strong case around a project that does align to a priority area. And there's a third example that we've provided around project alignment. The example, again, is a fictitious one, but still relevant. ABC is an SME manufacturer of food manufacturing equipment. Their key customers are frozen and ready-made meal producers who bulk process food to create fresh and frozen ready-made meals for sale both to supermarkets and also to catering companies. The project centred around the purchase and installation of some new machinery that will be used to manufacture specialised food processing equipment that, when used by its customers, will help extend the shelf life, taste and quality of their frozen food products. So here's an example where a business is producing equipment which isn't necessarily being directly sold to customers in that priority area of food and beverage, but they are producing equipment which is then being used to support the manufacturing, in that sector by other food processing and food manufacturers. So it's just, this example has been provided to demonstrate that it isn't necessarily a straight line in terms of how the alignment could occur. We're looking in particular at what is being manufactured and how that's also then going to be sold to either a customer or to another manufacturer to support manufacturing in one of the priority areas. So having a quick look at some of the, I guess, the eligible activities that are included under this particular program, and this list is not exhaustive, so for those of us looking at the webinar today and then considering putting an application in, make sure that you do take the opportunity to look at the key documents. But key activities include buying, constructing and installing plant and equipment. That could also include commissioning costs associated with installing or constructing that plant and equipment. One aspect which has been clearly defined in the program guidelines this time around is that there is an ability to include expenditure for software related expenditure that is clearly directed or clearly linked to the manufacturing activities that you are undertaking as part of your project. So what that's not looking to do is include or allow for software that's, I guess, more administrative based and has broader application beyond the particular project and manufacturing line. So we're not looking at expensed software claims. We're looking at software that relates to your equipment and that is treated as an asset as such, like your equipment would be in your accounts. Relevant training skills to develop your staff and to be able to use that particular equipment and whatever accreditations and other advanced processes they're able to undertake as a result of that. Any design or engineering activities that directly relate to your capital investment as part of your project, and reasonable fit-out costs. So reasonable fit-out costs sometimes does result in questions being asked around what that might mean. If you've got any particular questions about your project, then please let us know. We can give you some guidance around that. One of the key changes from round 1 to round 2 to take into consideration is eligible expenditure and when you can incur that eligible expenditure. I won't read through all the dot points in this particular slide, but what I will make clear is that under round 1, you are not able to incur any expenditure until you receive a letter of offer from the program area after the applications were all submitted and assessed. This time around, to provide some flexibility, we are allowing, and the guidelines provide for an ability for an applicant who submitted an application that's been advised is complete and eligible to commence incurring expenditure from that date that we advise you of that. However, we do say, and we will say in the letter that you receive at that point, if you are eligible, that you're incurring that expenditure from that point at your own risk. So the Commonwealth won't be liable for any expenditure you do incur until your application A is approved, because at that point your application won't be approved. It'll just be a case of that you've received confirmation that it's eligible, and then you can start incurring expenditure at your own risk. And B, you've executed an agreement. That's the point in which the Commonwealth will be liable for that expenditure. So anything you do or choose to do at that point will be at your own risk, but it does provide some additional flexibility in terms of when you can start your project. That wasn't there under round 1. And look, if you've got questions once you do receive your letter advising of the outcome of your eligibility status, then please contact us and we can provide you guidance around that. There's also not necessarily a clear or a definitive approach that once you receive your letter of or your outcome of your letter of your eligibility status, that all expenditure you've included in your project is eligible. That is something that we do refer through and ask to review as part of negotiating a contract if you are successful or offered a grant under the program. So, getting to the merit criteria, there are 3 merit criteria to respond to with subpoints for each of the criteria. The first one is looking at how your project will improve your Australian manufacturing competitiveness and Australian job growth. When you're considering this question, you need to demonstrate, or responding to this question, this particular assessment criterion, you need to demonstrate how you can actually show this and describe a business case for identifying your particular project and how you can respond to the criteria. This first criterion is worth 50 points, but I will make a point here that that each of the criteria need to be addressed equally in terms of making sure that you do respond to all the questions, but also that you need to rank highly against each of the three criteria in order to receive funding. So that's the way in which the committee can demonstrate there's value for money, that all criterion have been ranked highly. So under points A and B, point A is looking at how you adopt innovative transformative manufacturing technologies, design and engineering excellence and innovation and efficient business processes to enhance the productivity of your business So what's that really saying? You need to explain the type of technology that you're looking to invest and adopt as part of your project, and you need to explain how that is transformative to your particular business. One of the key things you need to think about is not asserting certain claims within your responses to the merit criteria, but you need to put forward an argument and also demonstrate that with evidence and supporting information to back up those claims that are put through. B is looking at the extent to which your project will improve your competitiveness, i.e. how it will help you compete for customers by creating additional value for your business. You should also identify benefits for your project that will generate, to the broader economy and how that will impact and benefit supply chains and spillover benefits. There are another three sub-criteria that apply to assessment criteria 1. The next one is looking at job growth. So we've talked about job growth earlier in the presentation, but really this is the part where you've actually got to demonstrate, put forward a reasonable argument as to how you've derived or come up with the forecast job creation and job retention numbers that you've identified in your application. So you need to provide the rationale that underpins some of those numbers that you're forecasting. We will be asking throughout if you're successful throughout the life of the project and you're managing that contract, how you're tracking to those particular forecasts, and we need to understand if there are any changes that dramatically impact those forecasts as part of the grant contracting process and ongoing process. But yes, you need to understand the rationale and explain that as part of this particular response. These are a really important one in terms of your market opportunity. Again, if I can provide a contrast around one for the highly competitive applications, they were the applications that were able to demonstrate clearly their market opportunity, but also evidence that provide quantifiable information that showed or demonstrated that there was indeed a real opportunity there, but also how that opportunity was going to be utilised or taken advantage of in the merit response. So don't just assume it's implied that you can do it. You need to demonstrate how you're going to do it to the committee assessing the application. And E is looking at how your project aligns. So we talked about sort of having a dual process for that particular part of the National Manufacturing Priority threshold, so one being an eligibility threshold. Here is your opportunity to demonstrate how you can impact or grow or extend the support that relates to the particular priority area you're identifying that your project aligns to. So put your best case forward. Assessment criteria 2, a couple of key points from this. So we're looking at the capacity, capability and resources to deliver the project. I won't necessarily read through the criteria in the interest of time, but the key things to take away from criterion 2, other than the fact that it's worth 30 points of your total score compared to the 50 in the prior or the first criterion, is that here's a real opportunity for you to demonstrate your track record. So don't just assert again that you've able to achieve, or the people involved with the project have been able to achieve certain things, or the business have been able to achieve certain things in the past. Demonstrate how you've done that and what the outcomes and impacts have been. Your project plan is critical. So I think some of the more competitive projects that are around one were the projects where they provided more than just a Gantt chart as a project plan. You need to really go through and demonstrate that you've got a considered project proposal that you're putting forward, looking at risk analysis, looking at a range of things of how you're going to implement your project. Use this as an opportunity to capture anything that you can't in some of the other merit criteria or other responses where the information might be limited. Don't just provide a timeline is my best advice in relation to this. Present your best case as part of your project plan. And the third criterion is worth 20 points. It's a bit more straightforward in terms of what it's asking. Again, I'll reiterate some of the earlier points. Make sure you're reading the question, make sure you're understanding what it's asking, but also responding to each of the questions. If there were some observations from some of the applications that weren't as competitive in round one, is that they address some of these points better than others, and that does impact your overall chances of being competitive in such a, I guess, a high volume or competitive process. So under this, points A and B are fairly straightforward in terms of what they're asking. C is a really opportunity for you to demonstrate what this means for your business and how the project will allow you to leverage the outcomes for your business moving forward. Some other sort of general tips and hints for submitting a strong application. I've kind of covered this briefly, but read the guidelines. It's super important that you've got a clear understanding of what the guidelines are asking and what you're required to do. The key documents on business.gov.au/MMF, which will take you direct to that landing page, offer a wealth of information for you to utilise. The sample application form I've talked about. There's an FAQ on there which provides loads of information, which is sort of summarising a lot of what's in the guidelines for you in a succinct way. We've this time around included lots of information around how you might source some assistance or help or information from CSIRO. There's a range of things that sit within that area of the landing page. So utilising information that's available under the key documents. In terms of responding, clearly explain your project. Clearly explain what the outcomes are of your project. Identify realistic and concrete milestones when you're responding to those as part of your application, and also quantify what you're asserting in terms of outcomes. i.e. looking at the number of jobs created, or if you're looking at improved production cycle times, give us a baseline now and then tell us what it'll be as a result of the project, for example. Don't just assert it'll be better. Present your best case forward. I've spoken about this in terms of the national manufacturing priority areas. This is, this is a dual process I mentioned before in terms of eligibility and merit assessment. So the merit assessment really is a case for you to put your best case forward around why you believe your project aligns to that area. Consider the type of technology your project's going to adopt, and we talked about that under merit criterion 1 and some of the other technologies that are available or we'd be expecting to see earlier in the presentation, and understand or consider where that technology sits, I guess, in the broader scope of modernising and manufacturing technologies. The next point, kind of just reiterating some of the earlier points as I went through, just around unfounded assertions. Demonstrate your case, provide justifications and provide evidence. And successful applications, as I said before, must score highly against all assessment criteria. I'll just reiterate the last slide because it's really important and something we do say to all of our prospective customers who phone through and ask questions. Read the guidelines again and the sample application form. There's loads of really valuable tips and tricks and information in there about what you need to do or consider when you're responding. And don't lose sight of the objectives and the outcomes of the program when you're completing your application. It's really important to be clear about what it is we're trying to achieve and make sure that your question, the way you tailor the response to your questions, take that into account. Some practical steps just to conclude. To submit your application, you need to go to the MMF landing page. So again, that's found through business.gov.au/MMF. That'll take you straight to the landing page. About halfway down that landing page, that diagram to the right, you need to click on the Apply Now button. That will then take you to the sign-in access part of the online portal. So I talked about a sample application form versus submitting a formal application through the portal, and that's where you need to sign in to do that. If you haven't done so, when you click sign in, it will ask you to first register. If you've previously applied or created a portal account, it'll take you straight to your account. And that's what it looks like once you click sign in, and that's just reiterating what I said just a moment ago about either registering or going straight to your account. One other tip just to take into consideration here is that for this particular program, it's been set up that the primary contact who will be the one submitting the application must be an employee of the business who is applying. So that could be the director or someone else that's an employee of the business, but it won't be open to others outside of the business to submit the application and be the primary contact outside of that side of the business. That said, for those who are new to the process of the online portal account, there is an ability to provide access rights to share some information in terms of the application process. It's just a submission process at the end that will require an employee to be a primary contact. So what happens next in terms of the process? Once round 2 closes for applications, then again, just reiterating it's the 21st of January at 5 p.m. And check your local times in relation to that. We'll then start the process of reviewing all applications for completeness and eligibility, and then we'll notify you of that outcome. And that's the point in which, as I mentioned before, some decisions will need to be made internally for your particular business as to whether you're willing to take the risk to start your project at that early stage or wait until the outcomes of the assessment process is complete. Applications will then go to the committee for assessment, and then recommendations that follow from that assessment will be made to the delegate, and then we'll then notify you in writing of your application outcome. The key documents section I talked a little bit about before, but when you go into the landing page, there is a section that looks just like I've included in that diagram to the right around key documents, and that just lists some of the ones there that that are available to you, including the board and CEO letter, which I talked about earlier in the presentation. So make sure you familiarise yourself with all those documents, particularly the frequently asked questions document. It might sort of shortcut or save you having to make that additional phone call or inquiry. There is loads of really helpful information that's recorded there. The webinar, in terms of other information and sources of finding further information, the webinar recording will come up online in the coming days, and you'll be sent a link in relation to that. Soro, I spoke about before, is playing a part to support us in the implementation of this program. So there's a load of content on the landing page in relation to Soro, as well as the links and about how Soro supports SMEs currently. So that is available for you to look at. Questions, you can go through our contact centre, and there'll be the last side will have some information around that as well. 132846 Monday to Friday. And then if there are any specific sort of program questions, then my team will come back to you if you send through an inquiry through to mmf@industry.gov.au. And if you're seeking to find some information, sort of just to round back to the start of the presentation in relation to the modern manufacturing strategy more broadly, you can search at industry.gov.au/manufacturing. Thank you. I hope that was a helpful sort of hour to run through the main parts of the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund, the broader strategy, some of the things you need to think about in terms of how you respond to your application, where to find information, and again, if you've got further questions, there are details on the screen there that you can follow up, and we look forward to hearing from you either at that point or if you're submitting an application.
Thanks, Daniel, and thank you to everyone for joining the session today. Just a reminder, as Daniel said, that this session has been recorded, and you'll be able to watch it again by visiting the website, which is business.gov.au/MMF. And if you have any questions about the content that Daniel has provided today in relation to your project specifically, can you please email mmf@industry.gov.au with those questions. The team are very responsive, and they'll be back with you as soon as possible. And again, just to reiterate the closing date and time for round 2, it's Thursday the 21st of January. For New South Wales, ACT, Victoria and Tasmania, you need to have your applications in by 5 p.m. For South Australia, that's 4:30 p.m. In Queensland, it'll be 4 o'clock. Northern Territory is 3:30 p.m. Western Australia is 2 p.m. And just to reiterate, that's Thursday the 21st of January. As you said, just reach out if you've got any questions, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you.